Welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the view from the opposition. And this week it comes from Owen Younger, a Manchester United supporter and fellow colleague of mine at the Chronicle. Familiar face of the podcast, and unfortunately a familiar Christmas jumper that he's wearing, because he had this on last year as well, if I'm not mistaken. Owen, thanks for popping on. How are you keeping? You well?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah. No. And on the Christmas jumper, I couldn't find another one this year that I could sort of replace it with. So I thought it's the good old faithful, and I'll put it on again. Yeah.
For those listening, it's kind of like a replica Christmas jumper of the 96, 97 kind of kit, right?
Yeah, I believe so. It's got loads of 99s on it down here. I don't know if you can see those there, but so I think it's sort of it says golden balls on this bit as well. So it's sort of Beckham inspired, but yeah, I think it's sort of that sort of late 90s era, definitely.
99, that's about when you won the Champions League, right? So it might be
Yeah,
kind of a homage
commemorate.
to that. But yeah, thanks for popping on and sharing the insight into Manchester United. I said on the match preview with John Gibson that I'm accepting nothing but a win for Newcastle United. Old Trafford is not the fortress that it once was. Admittedly, Manchester United are going a little bit better than they have done in previous seasons with Ruben Amorim, but still not the Manchester United of old. Nothing to fear. If I was Eddie Howe, my message is simply get into them and get 3 points back to Tyneside.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, it has, like you said, been an improvement. I think we have seen, better form and a little bit more consistency, if not, anywhere near the level that it should be at. But I think, as you say, Old Trafford isn't what it was, and I think we, as a club so far this season, have actually only kept a clean sheet in one game at Old Trafford. So I think that shows you that it's certainly not, like you said, the fortress from a defensive point of view that you mentioned. Yeah.
And obviously, you've got some big injury news. The fact that Bruno Fernandes is going to be missing from this game. Talk to us about how big of a blow that is for Manchester United.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a bit deja vu because I remember this time last year, roughly was when Bruno Fernandes was also out, and obviously that was the 2-0 Newcastle win at Old Trafford, and yeah, I mean that was he is such an important player. I think that can't be overstated, and I think from our point of view, like seeing what he brings to the team from the point of view of leadership and obviously his actual technical skills and goals and assists and everything that he gets. It's the biggest blow you could get from an injury point of view as a Manchester United fan, and because it happens so rarely, I think we're all kind of shell shocked from that point of view. Like you don't really kind of expect it to happen, and when he did pull up at just before half time, it was definitely a shock to everyone watching, really.
So who's going to replace him?
Well, I mean, I could see, obviously in the last couple of games there has been a bit of a change from a defensive point of view, which I think will sort of lead into to what happens with Bruno. So obviously there has been elements in games where we've been playing sort of more of a four at the back, and obviously in that game against Aston Villa there was more of a kind of beefed up three in midfield with Bruno in there. So I could see obviously with Casemiro being back. Potentially a more defensive midfield with him and Ugarte potentially playing together, and Mason Mount sort of just ahead of them, with the attacking players that we do still have in front. But I could see that being more of a staying in line with the way that we played against Villa from a midfield point of view. You would put Casemiro back in there would be my best guess as to what I could probably see happening.
And I guess the fact that he's missing from the middle, Bruno Fernandes, if you looked at Newcastle's midfield three just on talent and ability, i.e. Joelinton, Tonali and Bruno. Now, Joelinton's probably most likely not going to feature, so you're chucking Jacob Ramsey there, chucking Joe Willock. But in particular, Bruno and Tonali, you'd be maybe fearing the battle on Boxing Day because you are missing Fernandes. But you look at the fact that the midfield of Newcastle hasn't been at its best in recent games, and it gives you a little bit of hope that Fernandes won't be as big of a miss as you're fearing.
I mean, potentially. I think obviously that is a big part of the reason. I think Newcastle's midfield and the respect that should be shown to them, considering how how good they are as individual players. I think that would be part of my reasoning for putting Casemiro in there. Would be actually we need that little bit more defensive support and battling in there, which is his his bread and butter. Really, that's what he's very good at. So I think to have him and Ugarte alongside each other, I would feel a little bit more comfortable from a defensive standpoint against Newcastle's midfield, but it leaves you with such a kind of gap in the the creativity, which I think Mason Mount has shown that he has the potential to be able to do some of. But I just think with Bruno Fernandes, with how much he takes on his back and does himself, I think that Mount can shoulder a little bit of that, but I just don't know if he will be able to kind of provide all of that creativity to kind of to go and battle with Newcastle's midfield.
You mentioned the issues in defence. Why do they concede so many goals? And I mean, is it just a case of not switching on right until the end?
I mean, I think there's an element of individual errors that come into it. Like I think obviously there was the Villa game with the two Morgan Rogers goals. I think Lani Yoro was at fault for like at least one, if not both of those. And obviously when you do have that chopping and changing, we had Harry Maguire was ever present, and he's been out for a while now. Same with Matthias de Ligt. And I think when you do have that kind of change in midfield, in defence, we have obviously Martinez coming back as well. And trying to kind of get him back into that back three. So it's a funny one, because I mean, especially against Villa, we had sort of Aiden Heaven as that so young, and he was sort of the defender in the middle, the kind of big defender trying to marshal everyone else around him. And actually, for him to be doing that at his age is a big responsibility. So I think it's one of those where there's been so much change around the defence that it does come down to individual errors and kind of knowing exactly where you should be and where you need to be in that system. But also I think it's a situation where you have that back three, and every time you turn around, there's another player, a different player next to you than there was in the last game. And I think that does affect it as well.
Just talk to us about what's going on with Kobbie Mainoo, because there's been plenty of speculation about his future. Then there's been talk of injuries. What's going on there?
I mean, I think it's a funny situation. Obviously, it was very much brought back to the fore. I think it had gone a bit quiet, and then there was all the things with his brother Jordan, obviously at the side of the pitch with the free Kobbie Mainoo t-shirt on, which I think wasn't ideal and didn't really help the situation in any way. And I think, to be honest, it's just one of those sort of strange situations where he just doesn't quite fit into the system, or Amram at least feels like he doesn't quite fit in the system at the moment, because he is a very attacking minded midfielder. And I think that was something that, for example, in for England in the Euros, he was very good at being that player that kind of progressed them forward and from the midfield role when he did get into the team and start playing. And I think in Amram's system, you do have to kind of be a bit more sort of like focused on the attack and defense simultaneously, and be a bit more balanced in that. And I just think he isn't at that sort of level as a midfielder where he can necessarily do a really good job in that too. But I think you have sort of the likes of Ugarte and Casemiro and even Bruno. I mean, he's shown to be very adept in that role. That they sort of do have that experience factor over Mainoo. But I think with Amram, obviously, there's clearly some sort of issue there with their relationship, whether it is kind of a personal thing. Obviously, again, not helped by what Kobbie's brother's been doing. But I think it is one of those where it doesn't quite feel irreconcilable just yet, but it feels like it's very much on that path. Obviously, we've seen it happen at Man United recently with a lot of players. So I think it feels like it's slowly but surely travelling down the path of there may be no return sooner rather than later.
I mean, you may have overheard the chatter in the office from the sports desk, but Mainoo is at the top of the list for quite a few of our team who would like to see Newcastle try and go and buy, or maybe bring on loan in January. Could he do a job for Newcastle United, do you think?
I believe so. I mean, I think his talent is unquestionable, really. Like, I think from what we've seen, how seamlessly he fitted into the not just the Man United side when he first came through, but the England setup as well, and how like he just looked at home there and looked so comfortable on the ball. And I think he, potentially in more of a sort of traditional system, which Newcastle do play, I think would be better potentially, and I think would kind of fit in more naturally. Obviously, it was what Ten Hag played previously, and I think that is where he was sort of at his best, was in that sort of three in midfield when he had that protection of the more experienced players around him. And I think obviously he would get that at Newcastle with the midfield that you guys have. So I think it is one of those where I could see him, as much as I don't personally necessarily want it to happen, I could see him going and doing well in that sort of a system, because of the fact that he is such an elite passer of the ball, and he has those players around him that will be able to keep him right and keep him positionally in where he needs to be.
Well, let us know in the comments if you'd like to see Newcastle go after Mainoo in January and how you would see him fitting in at Newcastle United. Just a reminder, this episode is sponsored by NordVPN. If you've been lucky enough to get a host of new devices for Christmas, then you're going to want to download NordVPN to help protect yourself while on public Wi-Fi and from the threat of potential hackers and scammers lurking in the shadows. No risk with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Hit the link in the podcast description box for a discounted offer. And a big thanks to FPro, the trainer mat, which can help improve your skills as a footballer. Again, we've got up to 60% off on the trainer mat from fpro.com. Head over to fpro.com/EIBW20 and get yourselves a late Christmas present. Plenty of talk there, Owen, about systems, and with the injuries that you guys are suffering, do you see him tweaking his system slightly? It's something he hasn't done. He's been very stubborn. Even when things were going particularly bad, he stuck by his system. But are injuries and absentees going to force his hand, do you think, on Boxing Day?
I think potentially. I mean, I think the Bournemouth game, the crazy game that was. I think that was the first kind of inkling of actually, a potential change. I think we saw times in that game where we did go to a back four. Given the changes that were made when teams were ahead and all of a sudden we found ourselves behind. So I think that's one where like there was that level of flexibility which we hadn't seen as fans, we hadn't seen that previously. And I think obviously when you do look at the back five that has been playing more recently, obviously you've got Heaven in the middle, Yoro on the right, Shaw on the left when it comes to the three centre backs, and you could imagine that as a back four, Shaw can shift along. You could have Dallo as that right back coming back from his wing back position, and then you can have Heaven and Yoro as the two centre backs. So it does feel like a relatively natural shift that we could see happening, and obviously it does mean that you could beef up that midfield with an extra player like Casemiro, for example, obviously coming back from his short suspension. So I think it's one where I wouldn't be hugely surprised if he did change something, but at the same time, because of how much we've seen of kind of rigidly sticking at the system, I think if he can find a way to make it work with the players that we still have, then he'd look to do that first before he then went, actually, okay, maybe we have to change something because I've not got another choice.
And how will they approach this game, Manchester United? What do you think, first off, they're wanting to get from this game on Boxing Day? Is it's 3 points, or is it, we understand how threatening Newcastle can be? A point would be a good starting point.
I mean, I'd say so. I think it's one way, obviously, we need to prioritise not conceding as many goals. I think, when you look at the last 4 games in the league, there's been 4 points from a possible 12, and I just think that's not good enough. Like it's not a situation where if you look at those games as well and think, this isn't ideal. This isn't sort of what you would want, really. So I think it's one way, obviously, we'll be looking at that and thinking, we need to start getting wins on the board because we've had opportunities to kind of to go up the league and to get in and around the top 5, top 4, which we haven't taken sort of time and time again, really, because I think we've been the Monday night football for sort of a few weeks in a row and have seen all the other teams potentially drop points or not do as well, and then not taking advantage of that. So obviously this is a weird one because actually we're the first game of this game week, so it's kind of about, I guess, putting a marker down and sort of saying, actually, we can keep the ball well, which obviously has always been a thing that Amram's wanted to do, and create those chances. It just obviously is the thing I keep coming back to, is that worry of actually when you do have a lot of the ball and are trying to make something happen, the big player that does that is Bruno Fernandes, and he isn't going to be there, of course. So that's I think the element of it would still be that we'd want to have a lot of the ball and would want to try and probe and make those openings, but just whether we have the players on the pitch to do that is what remains to be seen, I think.
It's okay. You can have 90% of the ball and just give it to Newcastle for 10%. We'll hit you on the counter with pace, with speed. Hopefully the strikers can be clinical when the chances come their way. That's all I want to hear from people when they come on the View from the opposition, that you guys are just going to want the majority of possession, because for me, that's still when Newcastle are at their very best. And in a place like Old Trafford, I think that's when Newcastle will excel, because they can absorb the pressure, but also they can press high with intensity and get the ball moving at pace, and with your defence and the tendency to concede goals, and that could be music to the ears of the Newcastle United players. Of course, we've got the issue, though, that Newcastle could go 2-0 up, in the first half, and I'd still be willing to bet my last penny that they'll come out and concede 2 and not hold on to the lead, which is a big, big issue. The away form is a big issue as well, only won at Everton in the Premier League. So I guess from a Man United point of view, there are flaws in your approaches, flaws in your performances. It's very inconsistent as well. And the form at Old Trafford is, like we said at the start, not what it used to be. It's only 4 wins out of 8 so far this season. But you'll be looking at Newcastle and thinking, well, they can't win on the road away from St James's Park, and they can't hold on to leads. So that's where, even if we do go 2 goals down, that's where we can hit them, and they're still vulnerable, and there's always a chance.
And I think it feels like one of those situations where like something has to give from that point of view. We have, like you said, that those defensive frailties at home, and only having the that one game where we actually kept a clean sheet. And I think it's one of those where you kind of look at the individual battles on the pitch, and you think, from a Newcastle point of view, whichever 2 wingers it is that end up playing, there needs to be that element of actually, is it going to be the left-sided and right-sided centre-backs that are dealing with them, or the wing-backs going to have to drop in, and probably Dorgu and Dallow, I would have thought it would end up being, are they going to have to drop in and help with them as well, which obviously then doesn't necessarily give us enough going forward. So it's one of those where I think you look at it from an individual battle perspective and think, if Newcastle can kind of overwhelm us down the sides, then I think that could be an issue. But at the same time, it's like, actually, if we're able to organize ourselves and have those sort of 2 players working together and knowing where each other should be, that are kind of occupying those sides of the defense, then that could be a way of stopping that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those where we look at look at the issues that Newcastle have been having and think, actually, this isn't one. Because I mean, obviously Newcastle have a very good record against Man United recently, especially. I think it's sort of four wins in the last 5, which in the league, which isn't compared to kind of what it was before that. So I definitely think we have those sort of reservations because of the more recent results, but kind of look at it and think maybe this isn't quite the Newcastle United team that we had played in those games, or they're not quite playing up to that highest standard. So excuse me. So I think that's sort of the where I'm sat thinking, there is I feel like I've got a good sort of positive feeling going into it because of the fact that that it's just not quite that sort of those high levels that we've seen previously, really.
I will beat that out of you, no problem, because I'm going to ask you a question about who you're fearing from a Newcastle United point of view. So hopefully any optimism flies out the window with your next answer.
Well, I mean, it's a funny one. I think I would definitely look at Voldemort as a player that I could potentially see us struggling with, especially from the point of view of the way our defense has been. I mean, Aidan Heaven did have quite a good game, I think, against Villa, even though obviously we did end up losing that one. I think unfortunately that game it was down to just Morgan Rogers' brilliance, really, in the 2 goals that he scored, and obviously those slight errors from a defensive point of view. And when Bruno came off, I just don't think we had that creativity. But back to Voldemort, I think he. He's a sort of a real challenge for a defender. I think, especially when it comes to us not having the likes of a Harry Maguire and a Matthias de Ligt, which I mean, it doesn't look like at the moment either of those 2 are going to be back yet. But I mean, I think one of those 2 more experienced defenders would be better to kind of to go up against him and deal with him. But actually, if Aidan Heaven's that one in the centre that's going to have to do that, he just is inexperienced and can be prone to just not quite being having that sort of like the experience of dealing with a striker like him. And I also think Lewis Miley as well recently has shown sort of an extra kind of gear and an extra sort of probably surprised a lot of Newcastle fans recently, because he just hadn't sort of like I know he burst onto the scene as he did and kind of just became a bit of a squad player, but actually it seems like he's come back into the fore recently and has stepped up when other players maybe haven't. So I think he's certainly one that offers something a bit different that we have to be wary of as well.
Yeah, he's been at right back the last couple of games. We've been absolutely brilliant. Man formerly of your parish, Garnacho, got no change out of him. He was brilliant against Chelsea. So hopefully that form continues into this game and the game's coming up, because Livramento looks like they'll be out for a little while. I'm excited for this game. I'm feeling confident. I think something's got to give, as you said, from the Man United point of view, but from the Newcastle point of view, they can't keep being this poor on the road. They can't keep throwing leads away. So there's no time like the present to make sure that changes, and why not at Old Trafford? Talk to us just briefly about Cesco. Obviously, Newcastle, Man United went head-to-head for him, great goal scoring record at his previous club. But so far, my fear about him, the fact that he only had a couple of prolific seasons, and that I question whether the price tag was right for him. I question whether now was the right time, and would he not need like one more season just to prove he can do it? A bullet dodged for Newcastle United, do you think?
I think it's a funny one. I think it's a problem we've had with strikers for quite a while. Obviously, we've had, I think Rasmus Højlund had very similar issues. I think there's a lot of parallels between those two as players, and I think with the sort of the journeys they've had at Old Trafford so far. But I actually think it's, he's shown glimpses. Obviously, he did have that period where he did score a couple of goals and was starting to look like he was starting to get to grips with things. Had a little injury and hasn't looked quite the same since he came back. So I do think, he's one of those players where he certainly has the potential. I mean, he's shown that before previously in other countries, and I think it's one of those where, you look at him and you think you do have the makings to be a very good striker. I mean, he's got everything from a physical point of view, the speed and the power and the height, which are all really important. But I just think it's about putting everything together and also sort of getting that service, which I think he hasn't really had an awful lot of yet, that on a consistent basis. I think because we've had Cunha and Mbeumo, obviously not Mbeumo at the moment, but because we've had those two who have been sort of like focal points in themselves and attacking and trying to score goals, he has sort of felt like the odd one out sometimes when he has played with them, because of the fact that he's not the, it's not like they're all trying to set him up. Actually, he's part of the attack, but someone like Joshua Zirkzee, for example, I think does a better job at the link up side of things and actually trying to play in the likes of Cunha and Mbeumo previously this season. So I think he is very good as potentially as an out and out striker, but I just don't know if this system and the way that we play currently is the best to get that out of him. But also at the same time, he has to take his chances when they come, and he hasn't always done that. So it's one of those. I mean, he's still so young, and I think I said this about Højlund as well previously. Is he is young and he has the potential. Can he put it all together, and can we help him put it all together by providing him with chances that he can put away?
Now I've asked that question, you know what's going to happen, don't you? He's going to score
Well,
a hat trick.
yeah, that's the thing. But I mean, he always looks like he has that in him, like he has that sort of like he's switched on, and like he is sort of, you can't halt his effort, you can't sort of fault that. But I think it's just one of those where it is about kind of trying to put things all together and get him into positions where we can take those chances. But yeah, whether it is something that is going to quite come good, and obviously for the amount of money that you mentioned that we paid for him, which again is a common trend with this football club, is going, we'll pay that extra however much to get this player because we really want them, but actually, will that fully get reimbursed? I'm not too sure at the moment, really.
Well, he can come good in 2026. Just have a stink on Boxing Day, and I'll be happy. Come on then, Owen. We'll finish off with your score prediction. How's it going to go?
Well, I mean, I think there's going to be goals in the game, I think, for both sides. I'd be very, very surprised if one side got a clean sheet either way, to be honest. I just think it's one of those where, Newcastle showed the defensive frailties away from home, especially as of we at home. So I can't see it being one where there's not a goal for either side. I'm going to go for a 2-1 win. I think I'm going to say it for Man United. I'm saying that. But I think it's one of those where I am positive going into it based on the the away form of Newcastle and the fact that they've just not quite been at it. But hopefully it's one where I feel like we can push on and get those sort of good results that I think the performances recently have deserved, but we just haven't quite been able to get them over the line and have conceded late and things like that. But yeah, I'm gonna be optimistic. I'm gonna say a 2-1 win, but like I said, I can't see it being a game that doesn't have goals for either side.
Just going to get you to. I'm going to ask that question again because both of us dropped out on my side, so I'm just going to cover my backside and in case it didn't pull through originally. So come on then, Owen. All that's left to be done is to get your score prediction for Boxing Day. How is it going to go?
Well, I think I'm going to say that it'll be a game with goals for both sides, really. I can't see it being one where it's a clean sheet for either team. I think there's been defensive frailty on both sides of things. Obviously, Newcastle away and us at home. So I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to say it'll be a 2-1 win. I think I'll say that Mason Mount could potentially get on the score sheet. I think obviously, like I said, he has to shoulder a lot of that burden left by Bruno Fernandes being injured. So I could see him having an influence on the game. But yeah, like I said, I'm going to be positive. I'm going to say 2-1, but I can definitely see it being a game where there will be goals for either side. I'd be surprised if it's kind of an eked out 1-0 or anything like that.
Because I've said I'm going to accept a Newcastle United win, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say 3-1 to Newcastle United. A little bit more in hope than expectation, but I do think this is a game they should be winning despite everything against them on paper, the form, etc. But yeah, I'm going to go for Newcastle United win, and hopefully correct on that one. Owen, thank you so much for popping on and providing the view from the opposition. I hope you have a lovely Christmas, and to you guys watching and listening, Merry Christmas to you all. Please do hit thumbs up, hit subscribe, and remember to get into the podcast description box to take advantage of those discounted offers, both on your NordVPN plan and your F Pro training mat. Have a wonderful time, and here's to 3 points at Old Trafford for Newcastle United.
Thank you.